What's up, Deckheads? Welcome back to NTG with me. It's the Gainswalker. Today we're going to be doing a Mythic tier list of Bloomburrow. And I know I'm a little bit late to that. Kind of didn't really play the set too much. Did play it, I want to say, the last 3 weeks of the set before it rotated out into Duskmorn. So let's talk about this real quick. Not a lot of Mythics in this one. I think there's only 20 total, but I did add some other cards that are worth mentioning. So I've got S, A, B, C, and then mention worthy. So first, let's start with Helga Skittish Seer. This is a banned card, 1/3. Whenever you cast a creature spell, mana value 4 or greater, draw a card, gain 1 life, and put a +1/+1 counter on this. I like it and I don't like it. I like it because it's a cool banned card, 1/3 for 3, not amazing, and it's also very hard to kind of cast that given that a lot of the lands that are out there right now and are tapped unless you control another of that type, and so there's just a lot of weird land caveats, I'll say. It does have another ability, add X mana of any one color, where X is its power, spend it only to cast creature spells with mana value 4 or greater. It's another kind of hurdle to the set. This set was great for a new deck that you'll see a lot of, I guarantee it. It is the mono red mouse deck, and it hits you hard. It hits you, I want to say, for lethal by turn 3 sometimes, and it being standard, that's going to be a very quick pick for a lot of players just because you're going to beat a lot of other decks out there, especially a lot of decks that rotated into this set specifically. So I'm going to say that that's C tier. It's cool, but that's C tier. Ral Crackling Wit. Now this is a good one. This is a prowess card. It says whenever you cast a non-creature spell, put a loyalty counter on Ral. +1, create a 1/1 blue and red otter creature token with prowess. -3, draw 3 cards, then discard 2 cards. Draw before discard, always great. So I do like seeing that. That's a good ability. And the -10 starts with 4, loyalty for 4, but -10 is draw 3 cards, get an emblem with instant and sorcery spells you cast have Storm. Big fan of Storm. My legacy deck is Empty the Warrens, mono red, just create a bunch of goblins. I can win before you draw. It's a very strong Storm deck. Of course, legacy, somebody always has a force of will, but that's neither here nor there. That is a great card. I'm going to say A, if not S, because let's say you're matching that up against the mono red. They're going to have a bunch of early game 1/1s that have prowess, that they're going to be able to do combat tricks, kind of bait out what you're doing on the board state. So it is a good matchup, and it probably plays well against a lot of the other decks. So I'm going to say that is S tier. But as you can tell, look what they did to Ral. I'm just going to enhance. Look what they did to Ral. This set has turned a lot of planeswalkers into animals. So the whole set is kind of like this predator and prey animal back and forth thing. So you get like the banding together of the weaker animals to fend off some of those stronger ones. So that's kind of cool in that aspect. I had a feeling that MTG would probably get around to something like this eventually, but we'll keep moving. The next one is the infamous Crew Claw. Now this one is pretty solid. This one, there is an outlaw deck that came out with the previous set, and a lot of people were excited about it. A lot of really cool cards that they could use. This is a 3-drop 3/3 menace. Whenever the infamous Crew Claw deals combat damage to a player, exile cards from the top of your library until you exile a non-land card. You may cast that card by discarding a card rather than paying its mana cost. Do I need to say more? That's that's pretty insane. So exile cards from the top until you exile a non-land card. Okay, so that could be a Tali, that could be a Troxa, that could be a lot of crazy things. So you can have this as a really good mid-game, and then maybe even get a late-game cheat into mid-game. So very strong card. It is a legendary. If it wasn't, I'd be very concerned. This is definitely S tier. There's no doubt about it. That is, you can't say that's not S tier. And the outlaw deck is a Rakdos deck, so this fits it perfectly. They probably made it for that reason. And yeah, this with tiny bones and all that stuff, just making you discard your hand, and playing stuff for really cheap. So definitely S tier. All right, next we've got Hugs Grizzly Guardian. This is a 4 and X 5/5. When Hugs Grizzly Guardian enters, exile the top X cards of your library until end of your next turn. You may play those cards. I like it and I don't like it. It's a heavy CMC and very specific CMC to cast. There's so many counters. There's so much removal. It's probably not going to see any play. You may play additional land in each of your turns. That's always great. You typically see that, I want to say, with a 4-drop mono green. Sometimes you see that as a 3-drop enchantment, like Oracle Moldiah. That's a great one. That's I believe it's a 4-drop. There is they're all just around that anyway. It is a cool kind of creature, but I'm gonna say C tier. I don't think anybody's gonna play that card. Yigra, Eater of All. This is a Golgari card. Let me try to get closer here. Alright, this is a 6/6 for 5. Ward Sacrifice of Food, but it makes every creature on the board a food token. So a little interesting to think about. Could help your opponent in that fashion, but anytime they sack a food to gain life, this gets 2+1/+1 counters on it. So that's either player that does that. So pretty neat. And to even target it, you have to sacrifice some food. So kind of hard to play around. You definitely want to counter this guy if you can. You can make them sack it. Anything like that. Sheldred's Edict is going to be great against this. There's still a lot of people playing mono black right now in standard. There's mono blue, mono black, mono red, mono green. There's everything is going on in standard right now. So a lot of cool things. I've seen this in a couple decks. Pretty sure I beat them every time. You can play around it. So I'll say A tier. Definitely not S. But 6/6 for 5 past vanilla, and it's got a lot going on. So I'll say A. Moving on. Beza the Bounding Spring, 4-drop 4/5. ETB, create a treasure token if an opponent controls more lands, gain 4 life if they have more life, create 2/1/1 blue fish tokens if they control more creatures, and then draw a card if an opponent has more cards in hand than you. Do you see a decent amount of people playing this? Not a lot, but it is a good even the board state. This is a good even the playing field kind of card, I'll say. And so I think that's the appeal that most people get with this card. So I'll say A tier for sure, but it's not S. And this next one, Illuge the Shoreless Sea. I saw one person play this, and I do play a good bit of Magic, but it's interesting. So it's power and toughness equal to the number of islands you control. So you're probably only going to see this in a mono blue. Whenever it attacks, put a flood counter on target land. So you're going to want to put that on each land separately, not stack it on the same one. And then it's an island in addition to its other types as long as it has a flood counter. So you can kind of, if you had a multicolored deck, you could make it, them all islands, I'll say. First instant sorcery spell you cast costs 1 blue or 1 colorless less to cast for each flood counter on it. So that's really good with the Jin deck, because you're playing instant and sorcery spells for cheaper anyway. They become even more cheaper with this. So you'll do Jin turn 3, Illuge turn 4, and then it's kind of a problem moving on. So and there are even more counters now out there. So you maybe see this in Azurius. I don't know. I'm gonna say A tier. A lot of great potential with this, but you gotta know how to use it. Maha. It's Feathers Knight. 5-drop mono black. It's a flying trample. To target it, you need to discard a card. So I have seen this, not a lot, but not a little either. Creatures your opponents control have base toughness 1. Throw that in a Rakdos deck. a lot of those board wipes, cheap board wipes to do 2 damage to everything or 1 damage to everything, could do a lot of work for you. It's also a 6/5 for 5 flying trample. So that is A. If not S. I might go S. I don't know. Let's go S. I mean, it's pretty solid. Even if that was your only creature, that's pretty good. Got a lot of resilience. This next one's awesome artwork. Dragonhawk's Fate Tempest. It's a chicken with 4 wings that's a bird dragon. I love that. It's a 5/5 for 5 flying, so it passed vanilla test. Whenever Dragonhawk enters or attacks, exile the top X cards of your library, where X is the number of creatures you control with power 4 or greater. So let's say this was the only one. You're still going to exile 1. You may play those cards until your next end step. So typically that'll be right away. At the end of your next end step, Dragonhawk deals 2 damage for each opponent for each of those cards that are still exiled. So if you can build up a board state, it won't take a lot to do a lot of damage, even if you can't cast anything. Because it says you may play until the end of your next turn, so you still have to pay the mana cost. But even if you don't, you're still dishing out a good amount of damage. It's only to opponent. If it was to any target, it would be insane. So I'm going to say B tier. But I really like the artwork. I think it's great. This next one I do see a lot of. Mono green is definitely making a push right now. I think mono red is definitely stronger. But we've got Lumra Bellow of Wood, 6-drop. It is XX for its power and toughness. Vigilance Reach. Power and toughness equal to the number of lands you control. So I see this a lot in a Golgari decks. So definitely gets high power toughness early. And then when Lumra enters, mill 4 cards, then return all land cards from your graveyard to the battlefield tapped. So that'll bring it back to the rug deck. There was a rug deck that was basically just pushing a bunch of stuff into their graveyard, and then it would use like Nissa, and there's this one, I think it's a 4-drop, that says maybe a 3-drop, 4-drop activated ability, sack this, return all lands from the graveyard to the battlefield. So there's, I think it's a 1-drop black card that says whenever a land enters the battlefield, deal 1 damage to target opponent. So that's great. A lot of people are using that in the the Outlaw Rakdos deck. But the key thing there is it's also got Offspring. So this whole set of Bloomburrow is a token oriented set, I'll say, because most of the stuff you'll see, there's a Selesnya tokens, really strong. Not early game, but I don't want to say mid game either. It's like right on the line in between. But there's a whole bunch of that going on. So that ability is called Offspring. You'll see a bunch of those. So they mixed in that one drop mono black with that strategy, and you still see that deck is still out there. But there's so many decks. Honestly, that's the best part of this set, is that there are so many new decks that you play against. This, I'm going to say S tier. It's a high CMC, but it's good. Alright. Seasons. Alright, so the next cards I'll show you, a little unique. There's 5 different seasons, and each one of these seasons has these little paw prints. It's like a modal spell almost. I think it is still considered a modal spell. But it says, choose up to 5 worth of modes. Oh, yeah, there you go. You may choose the same mode more than once. So you could create for 5/1/1s, or maybe you want to exile 2 non-land permanents and have that controller draw a card, and then create 1/1/1. Or maybe you want to do return target permanent card with mana value 3 or less from your graveyard to the battlefield with indestructible counter on it. And it's just a lot of ways you can mix that up. The one I've seen the most is Season of Weaving. And I guess I'll just talk about these as a whole when I go across. Alright, so the first one's Season of the Burrow. Create a 1/1, exile, or return something and put it indestructible. That is great. I'm going to say A tier. Season of the Weaving is draw a card for 1 artifact or creature you control, create a token that's a copy of it. That's great because you could just create uh, 2 tokens and draw, or return each non-land, non-token permanent to its owner's hand. So because it's a very token-heavy set, anybody who hasn't adopted that strategy or is trying to use the deck that they've been using before this came out is going to take a big hit with this card. So I think Season of Weaving is S tier. Plus drawing 5 cards for 6 is pretty solid. Season of Loss. This one is each player sacks a creature. Draw a card for each creature you control that died this turn. Each opponent loses X life, where X is the number of creature cards in your graveyard. This has plenty of things that help each other. I believe, let's say I sacked 2 creatures and did the each opponent loses X life, where X is the number of creature cards in your graveyard. I do believe that that would play off of itself. Either way, each player sacks a creature. You get to pick 5 of them. It's kind of like a board wipe, but making them sack. So even if I made them all indestructible and gave them hexproof, which is something I like to do, I'd still have to get rid of them, and that's just a really tough turn 5 to play around. Season of Loss, I'll say that's S tier. Season of the Bold says create a tapped treasure token for 5. 2, exile the top 2 cards of your library until the end of your next turn. You may play them. So I really like that wording. Until the end of your next turn. Very solid. Until the end of your next turn, whenever you cast a spell, Season of the Bold deals 2 damage up to 1 target creature. This is definitely A, if not S. Might say S. Oh, I did have it on here. Okay. Alright, so there we go. And then the last one, Season of the Gathering. Put a +1/+1 counter on a creature you control. It gains Vigilance, Trample until end of turn. Choose artifact or enchantment. Destroy all permanents of the chosen type. That's amazing for 2, by the way. Draw a card equal to the draw cards equal to the greatest power among creatures you control. Solid, but not crazy. I'm gonna say A tier. And now we go on to the. Oh, we got a couple here. Sorry. Good bit here. All right, so Warren War Leader. This is that offspring that I was talking about. Zoom in here. So Warren War Leader is a 4-drop 4/4 offspring for 2. I can only pay that cost once, but I would get another one of these as a 1/1. Whenever you attack, choose one. Create a 1/1 white rabbit that's attacking, tapped and attacking, or attacking creatures get +1/+1. So this would be your turn 4. Just try to throw it down and hope that they don't get rid of it so that turn 5 you can rush across with all the tokens that you have. A bit late. I have seen it play well. It's not crazy though, so I'll say B tier. It's Otterball Elite. This is amazing in the Is It Prowess deck, though I think even with the RAL that we started off with, I think that a Narset, so an American Prowess deck, would do amazing. So if I ever get enough craft cards around what I'm building right now, I'm doing an Azurius counter and make you pay more for the spells that you paid kind of deck thing. Check it out in standard ranked matches that I'll show you. It's kind of unique. But I think that I would do that next. Make an American Prowess deck and try to do those, because that's pretty resilient. And it can beat the mono red, and it can beat a lot of other things. Throw in Monastery Mentor, you get a really strong deck. So this is a 2-drop 1/3 Vigilance Prowess. Tap, draw a card, then discard a card. Awesome. Anytime you see it, that ability you want draw and then discard, not the other way around. 2, tap, copy target instant or sorcery spell you control. You may choose new targets for the copy, only if it's power 3 or greater. So I do like that, and I don't like that. If you have some kind of way to enchant this, or maybe equip something to it to give it power 3, much better than having to pay mana to do that, because then it's just a heavy target. It's already a target enough for removal. So when you try to get its power up, you're just asking for it. So I'll say A tier, not S though. Rottenmouth Viper. This is an S tier card. It's so annoying to play. So they're gonna have a bunch of tokens out, and then they're going to. It costs one less for each permanent sacrifice this way. So they'll do like investigate tokens, like the clues, or they'll do map tokens, or I mean just anything they can really. I would expect to see this in like the Boros Convoke, but make it a what is it? I always forget what this one's called. Uh, Mardu. I want to say. Make it a Mardu, and white, red, black, and that way you could still get the Boros Convoke stuff, even that like mono red mouse. They've kind of made the Boros Convoke into that mono red mouse build, but with a little bit more resilience to play mid game, and then have this be one of your late games, and still some discard, maybe Sheldred's Edicts, mix in something like that. But this is enters or attacks, put a blight counter on it. Then for each blight counter on it, each opponent loses 4 life unless that player sacks a non-land permanent or discards a card. So very interesting to play around because right at mid game to late game push, which is right where we're at here with 6 mana, that's going to be very tough to be holding a hand unless you've just been countering the whole time. So it's tough. It's tough to play around, and it's like at the worst time right before you want to see something like that. So this is S tier. If you haven't seen it, I'm sure you will. Storm Splitter, 4-drop, haste. 1/4, whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell, create a token that's a copy of Storm Splitter. Exile that token at the beginning of the next end step. I do like that it creates a bunch of tokens, but it doesn't have prowess. So it'll create a bunch of 1/4, but not a lot more than that. So you need some anthems. You need prowess somehow. So if you had this with Narset, because Narset gives every other creature prowess, then you might have something there. But I'll say this is a B tier one. Just too expensive to really get the value out of that. All right. I did have those on there. All right. So next, I think this is Blarg. Blarg is hilarious. Let's see. Let's just go right to it. Blarg. Or Glarb. There we go. Sorry. Alright, so Glarb for, let's see. We've got, it's a 3-drop 2/4 Death Touch. You may look at the top card of your library at any time. You may play lands and cast spells with mana value 4 or greater from the top of your library. Tap to Surveil 2. It is a bug card, and it is not great, I want to say. For 3, it's a 2/4, so it's not vanilla, but it's still there. -1/+1 for the power, toughness. I do like that you can look at the top card of your library and play lands, cast mana spells from the top. But it's mana spells 4. It does have Death Touch. I'm not gonna say C. I'll give it a B. But Glarb is not amazing. Real quick though, before I wrap this up, I want to show you some of the cool artworks because there are plenty. Those are the ones that I wanted to talk about. So we'll go ahead and mention worthy these. The first one I want to talk about is Fabled Passage. This is an S tier land for sure. If you aren't familiar with this one, get familiar. I think the original is a Weeping Willow. It's like a really cool, fiery looking Weeping Willow. And this one, it looks like strawberries or some sort of berry here. Sacrifice it, search your library for a basic land card, put it on the battlefield tap. Then if you control 4 or more lands, untap that land. Very popular card. Definitely worth getting in your deck if you can. It's only a rare, so check that out. While we're here, Fountain Port. It's another cool land. I like Blast Zone, so I recommend not having too many utility lands. That's what you would call these. But this one is pretty solid. So taps add for colorless, but it also two tap sack a token, draw a card. Plenty of tokens in the deck. You can get value that way. Three tap, pay one life, create a 1/1 blue fish creature token. So it creates a token that you could sack to draw a card. But then it also creates mana for four, the treasure token that you could use, but you could also sack to draw a card. It's good. You know what I mean? So definitely put that up there. Some of the other cards that we could talk about, there is, I think it's Commander. No, it's not. It's a, what do they call it? No, not Commander. Not special guest. Oh, starter kits. So in the starter kits, there's a couple of mythic rares. One of them is Bria, Riptide Rogue, which is just another prowess for Is It. Plenty of otter prowess cards that you've seen in these. 4-drop 3/3 prowess. Other creatures you control have prowess. Whenever you cast a non-creature spell, target creature you control can't be blocked this turn. So that's kind of nuts because you're gonna play a bunch of those, and you're gonna create a bunch of 1/1s that have prowess, and then in this kind of a deck, I'll say this card doesn't do that, but that's what you're gonna do, and then they'll have double prowess, and then they're gonna be unblockable, and it just gets not. It's a bunch of nonsense, but I think it's cool. So that's why I wanted to talk about that. Uh, Bark, Long Ear of the Law, 6-drop 4/4 vigilance. Uh, Enters, put a +1/+1 on each of up to 2 target creatures. Whenever a creature you control with a +1/+1 counter on it attacks, double the number of +1/+1 counters. It's a slow rolling thing, but if you don't get rid of it, it can be a problem. It's not amazing, but we're talking about. This next card is awesome, and I'll just touch on these real quick before I get up to that. But there's a bunch of Planeswalker cards that they turned into animals. So it's not just Ral. They thought that it would be hilarious to turn other Planeswalkers into animals as well. You'll see Jace the Mind Sculptor. Yes, the Mind Sculptor. That's a reprint. And it's he's a fox. Check that out. So if you like foxes and Jace, you probably want that card. This is an amazing card. OP, one would say, but definitely heavily played in Legacy, so check that out. 4-drop, +2, look at the top card of target player's library. You may put that card on the bottom of that player's library, so if you can tell they're trying to get some lands and it's not a land, okay, you can keep that. You know what I mean? Or if you can tell that they've just been playing lands and they don't have much else and you see a land, yeah, go ahead. Keep playing the lands. It's very fun to play around. Draw 3 cards, then put 2 cards from your hand on top of your library in any order. That's pretty solid. Return target creature to its owner's hand for -1. You get a nice little unsummon. And then the -12, exile all cards from target player's library. Then that player shuffles their hand into their library. So if they've been holding 7 cards, then their library is 7. And it's just, this is an amazing card. So I mean that's S tier. I'll probably move that all the way across here for mention worthy. Narset, pretty cool. I don't know. Is that a crane? What is that? Then we've got a bunny for Liliana of the Dark Realms. Is this the zombie one? No, this isn't. Okay, so this is search the library for a swamp card, reveal it, put it in your hand, and then shuffle. Target creature gets +X/+X or -X/-X, where X is the number of swamps. And -6, you get an emblem with swamps, have tap, add 4 swamp. So that's pretty neat. Not amazing though. Nissa, Who Shakes the World, 5-drop 5. Whenever you tap a forest for mana, add another forest. +1, put 3 +1/+1 counters on up to 1 target non-creature land. Untap it, it becomes a 0/0 elemental with vigilance and haste. Still land. Just great abilities for Nissa. You get an emblem with lands you control have indestructible. Search the library for any number of forest cards and put them onto the battlefield tapped. If you can get that to happen, that's a fun time. Move that up. Actually, Fabled Passage probably higher than that. Probably like this. Alright, Karn the Great Curator, 4-drop. Activated abilities of artifacts your opponent's control can't be activated, so in some matchups you have, this will just ruin your opponent for 4-drop, so that's pretty solid. Until the end of your next turn, up to one target non-creature artifact becomes an artifact creature with power toughness equal to its mana value. It's not as strong as you'd think. You may reveal an artifact card you own from outside the game, or choose a face-up artifact card you own in exile. Put that card into your hand. I have seen people use this pretty well. There's a solid reprint, but I wouldn't say it's a crazy Planeswalker, especially with what's out now. Alright, so we've got, what is this? Teferi. 3-drop Azurius. Each opponent can cast spells only anytime they could cast a sorcery, which is awesome because then they can't counter you. Until your next turn, you may cast sorcery spells as though they had flash. So kind of flip in that against your opponent, and then the return up to one target artifact, creature, or enchantment to its owner's hand and draw a card. So it's not crazy, but you do get a lot of value out of that. Where's my Teferi? There it is. Okay, moving on. We've got Narset and Domri Raid. I'm sorry, not Domri Raid. This is Domri Anarch of Bolas. 1 and Gruul. Creatures get +1/+0. +1, add a mountain or forest. Creature spells can't be countered. And then -2, target creature you control fights another target creature you don't control. That's a solid Planeswalker card. And I don't, is that a porcupine? It does look like a porcupine. That's a pretty solid card. Move that up here. We've got, is that Garruk? I think it is Garruk. And it kind of looks like a bear. A humanoid bear kind of thing here. This is 6-drop for 5 loyalty. For 0, create 2/2/2 black and green wolf creature tokens with, when this creature dies, put a loyalty counter on it on each Garruk you control. -3, and so that is actually when they came out with the Planeswalker rule switch up. It used to be that you could only have one type of Jace, one type of Elspeth, one type of Garruk, one type of Chandra, whatever. When that came out, I believe is when they switched it to you can have one of each different name of that Planeswalker. So that was kind of a big thing at that time, which is why it's worded that way. -3, destroy target creature, draw a card. -6, you get an emblem with creatures you control, get +3/+3, and have trample. Solid card. Creates a board state that protects itself. It's definitely up there. Alright, Elspeth, Sun's Champion. I think, is this the board wipe one? Yes. Not a crazy board wipe, but it's still pretty solid. 6-drop, 4 loyalty, +1, create 3 1/1 white soldier creature tokens. For -3, destroy all creatures with power 4 or greater. And then -7, you get an emblem with creatures you control, get +2/+2, and have flying. So it makes all your 1/1s 3/3s. Your board wipe is still good if you've been plussing and minusing up, appropriately. You could build a board state, make them huge, and board wipe anything that's too big to get around. So this is an amazing Planeswalker. Not better than Jace though, that's for sure. For sure. Tameo is a bunny rabbit, and honestly, if Tameo was an animal, that's like what I would think Tameo would look like, almost exactly. So this is a Bant and one other. +1, choose up to 2 target creatures until the end of your next turn. Whenever either of those creatures deals combat damage, you may draw a card. Sorry, you draw a card, not a May ability. You do it. -2, tap up to 2 target non-land permanents. They don't untap during their controller's next untap step. -7, draw 3 cards. You get an emblem with, you may cast spells from your hand without paying their mana cost. So, very great long-term potential there for that card if you can keep it alive. And the last thing that I want to mention here is actually, I think it's Dawn's Truce. What is it called? This is a pretty sweet card. I don't necessarily love the whole gift mechanic. So a lot of these cards will say, do this, or you can gift blank and do more. And I'll show you what I'm talking about. Where is Dawn's Truce? Yeah. So this card is sweet. I'm thinking about putting it in my standard deck. So 2-drop instant speed. You and permanents you control gain hexproof. I like that because there's plenty of cards where they'll like target opponent, or they'll cast it and say target player does like exile sacks multiple creatures. Target player discards bunch of cards. Deal damage to target player. That kind of stuff. This will give you hexproof, so they can't target you, which is awesome because then their spells will just fizzle out. But let's say it's a really hairy situation and they're doing a board wipe. Me and permanents I control get hexproof, and if I gift them a card, so if I allow them to draw a card, they'll draw the card, which is a little risky because sometimes they could draw a counter, sometimes they could draw something else that'll let them do more. You got to play it by ear. But if the gift was also promised, permanents also get indestructible until end of turn, which I like. So I don't know if I can fit this in the deck. It'd be cool if I could, but I threw it in the honorable mentions just because I like it, and that's kind of the play style that I like. Indestructible, hexproof, very resilient. Those are the decks I like to build. But that's gonna do it for this episode of MTG with me. I do appreciate you, and as always, watch these games, get those gains, and walk those planes. Until next time, deckheads, keep it easy.